I had nothing left. Not pride, not hope, not even a name I could say without shame. I'd burned every bridge, lied to every face that loved me, begged for chances I never honored, and sank deeper into a hell that I had built with my own hands. My body was alive, barely, but my soul was buried under years of denial, pain, and poison. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a shadow of what I used to be, crawling through gutters, trading what little I had for one more escape. The truth? I didn't know how I got so far gone. At first, I told myself I had control. That I could stop when I wanted. That I wasn't like them. But it never stops with just one hit, one pill, one drink. It always ends the same: empty bottles, cold floors, and the sound of your own voice crying out in a silence so thick, even God seems absent. Until he isn't. I don't remember the exact moment when it happened. I was lying in the street. Filthy. Sick. Alone. Not a single soul left who would pick up if I called. That night, the cold cut through me deeper than any blade ever could. And then, somewhere in that darkness, something shifted. A whisper, not in my ear, but in my chest. It wasn't loud, but it was final. It said, enough. That was the day I chose me. Not because I believed I deserved it, God, no. I hated myself. I didn't think there was anything left to save. But I was tired of dying a little more each day. I was tired of pretending I was beyond saving. And in that moment, I didn't promise perfection. I didn't vow to fix everything overnight. I just made one choice: to stop running from myself. This is the story of the day I stood up, not proud, not clean, not whole, but willing. And that was the beginning of everything. Rock bottom isn't a moment. It's not one big crash. It's a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone. You think you're still in control, but piece by piece, you're disappearing. You lie once, just to cover up a slip. Then you steal a little, just until payday. Then you lose a job, lose a friend, lose the right to look your mother in the eye. And still, you tell yourself, I'm fine. I've got this. I told myself that every single day, even when I was sleeping in strangers' basements, even when my hands shook so bad I couldn't hold a cup, even when my phone stopped ringing because no one trusted me anymore. I became a master of survival and a stranger to dignity. And the scariest part? I started believing that this was just who I was now. I wasn't always like this. I had dreams once. I had people who believed in me. But addiction doesn't care about any of that. It strips you down until all that's left is need, raw, relentless, brutal need. I did things I swore I'd never do. Hurt people I swore I'd die for. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I didn't recognize. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because you're broken. Bills keep coming. People keep leaving. And no one waits around for the addict to figure their shit out. So I kept spiraling, faster, harder, darker. There was this one night, I'd sold the last thing I had, hadn't eaten in 2 days, and I was sleeping in an alley behind a gas station. I was cold. Wet. Filthy. And I remember thinking, if I don't wake up, that's okay. Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way. Just a quiet surrender. Like a final exhale after holding my breath for too many years. And that should have been the end. But somehow, it wasn't. Somehow, I woke up. And that morning, something was different. Not better. Just still. Like the chaos inside me had paused for the first time. It wasn't peace. It wasn't hope. It was emptiness, but a kind that made room for something new. I didn't know it then, but that emptiness? That was grace. And it would lead me to the hardest, most important choice of my life. I became really good at pretending. That's what addiction taught me before it destroyed me, how to wear a mask so well that even I forgot who was underneath. I could talk my way through anything. Convince people I was just tired, just stressed, just had a rough week. I'd smile with cracked lips, show up late with half-truths, and swear on everything I had left that I'd never do it again. But I always did. The truth is, I wasn't lying to them as much as I was lying to myself. I told myself I was still functional. That because I could still string together a sentence, I wasn't that bad. That because I hadn't overdosed yet, I wasn't like the ones you see in news stories. But every time I said, "It's under control," I was already spiraling again. I remember walking into rooms and feeling like the air changed. People got quieter. Eyes flicked past me like I wasn't worth the time. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew the truth: people were done giving me chances. I had used up every ounce of trust. I wasn't someone you called when you needed help, I was someone you avoided when you wanted peace. There's a certain kind of loneliness that comes when you've burned every bridge, and you know it's your fault. It's not the kind of loneliness that's loud or dramatic, it's quiet. It's sitting in a room full of people and knowing you don't belong. It's realizing that even when they say, "I hope you're okay," what they really mean is, "I hope you stay far away." And I didn't blame them. I hated me, too. I hated the things I'd done, the people I'd hurt, the promises I'd broken. But instead of facing that, I ran. I ran faster into the only place where none of it hurt, just that brief, chemical silence where nothing mattered. The lie I lived inside became my prison. Every time I said, "I'll change," I meant it, for a few hours. Then the cravings came. Then the shame. Then the excuses. And the cycle swallowed me again. Until one day, I stopped saying anything at all. I didn't care if I lived or died. I just didn't want to feel. Not the guilt. Not the rage. Not the hollowness. So I stayed numb. That was my goal every day: find a way to stay numb. But here's the thing about lying to yourself: you can only do it for so long before the truth breaks in. And when it does, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door down. And mine was about to come crashing in. Because when you lose everything, when there's nothing left to protect or pretend, you're left with the one thing you've avoided the most: yourself. And I was about to meet myself for the first time in years. There was a mirror in the shelter bathroom, cracked, dirty, barely hanging on the wall. I hadn't really looked at myself in months. Maybe longer. I'd seen reflections, sure, store windows, puddles, shiny car doors, but I never stopped long enough to truly see what I'd become. That morning, for some reason I still can't explain, I did. What I saw didn't look human. My eyes were hollow, sunken into a face that barely resembled mine. My skin had turned grayish, stretched thin over bones that felt too sharp. My lips were dry, trembling, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I remember gripping the edge of the sink just to stay upright. And for the first time, I whispered out loud, "Who the hell are you?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Because I knew the answer. I was everything I swore I'd never be. I was the disappointment, the liar, the thief, the addict. I had become the kind of person people used as a warning. I stared at that stranger in the mirror and realized that somewhere along the way, I'd killed the person I used to be. And yet, somewhere, deep inside that wreckage, I felt something flicker. It wasn't pride, it wasn't hope. It was pain. Pure, brutal, honest pain. The kind you can't hide behind excuses anymore. It hit me like a wave. Every lie, every betrayal, every broken promise came crashing down at once. And I didn't have the strength to stand against it. I slid down to the cold tile floor and started to cry. Not the quiet, cinematic kind of crying. No. This was raw. Animal. I howled. I begged. I cursed God. I cursed myself. I wanted it all to stop. The shame was suffocating. I thought I'd already lost everything, but that morning, I lost the last illusion. I wasn't just broken. I was gone. But here's what no one tells you about that kind of breakdown: it's also a kind of cleansing. When there's nothing left to hide, you finally make space for truth. And truth hurts. It burns through every lie until there's nowhere left to run. Sitting there, I realized I had two choices. I could die as that person, or I could fight like hell to find the one I'd lost. I didn't know how. I didn't even believe I could. But a voice, small, quiet, but steady, rose up inside me. You can't stay here. It wasn't some divine thunder or glowing light. Just a whisper. But it was enough to make me lift my head. Enough to make me look at that ruined reflection and, for the first time, see not what I was, but what I could still become. That moment didn't fix me. It didn't erase the pain. But it cracked something open inside me. And through that crack, light began to seep in. It started with one word. A word I hadn't said with any real meaning in years. I stood up from that bathroom floor, wiped my face with my sleeve, looked back at the mirror, and said it out loud. Help. That was it. No speech. No plan. Just one word. And it wasn't for anyone in particular, it wasn't directed at a counselor, a priest, or even a higher power. It was just me, broken and raw, finally surrendering. For the first time, I stopped pretending I could fix this alone. I stopped pretending I was okay. That word, help, was my first act of truth. I didn't know what would happen after that. I didn't expect a miracle. But something shifted in me. Not hope exactly, but a willingness. A willingness to try. To listen. To take even the smallest step away from the hell I'd made my home. Later that day, I found the number to a local detox center. My fingers trembled as I dialed. I was sure they'd say they were full or ask for insurance I didn't have or tell me to try again tomorrow. But the woman on the other end said, "We can take you. Can you be here in 2 hours?" 2 hours. That's all the time I had to make the most important decision of my life. I could have said no. I could have disappeared again, made excuses, found another hit to quiet the fear. But that whisper from the mirror wouldn't let go, "You can't stay here." And somewhere inside me, I knew, if I didn't go now, I never would. I scraped together the last coins I had and got on a bus. I don't even remember the ride. Just the pounding in my chest. The shame. The fear. The questions. What if I fail? What if it's too late? What if I'm too broken to fix? But I kept moving forward. One stop at a time. The detox center was just a plain building on a quiet street. No signs, no promises. Just a front desk, a clipboard, and a nurse who looked me in the eye without flinching. She didn't smile. She didn't judge. She just said, "You made it. Let's get you inside." That sentence hit harder than any intervention or lecture ever had. You made it. Not you're cured. Not you're safe. Just, you showed up. You said help. You walked through the door. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief. Not peace. Dignity. The tiniest seed of it. The fragile start of it. And I held on to it like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. I thought detox would be about getting clean. Just the physical part. The sweating, the vomiting, the nightmares. I'd heard stories, how it's hell, how it breaks your body down. And it did. But nothing prepared me for what it did to my mind. The first night was pure chaos. My skin itched like it wanted to tear off. My bones ached in ways I didn't think were possible. I shook so violently they had to wrap me in blankets just to keep me from falling out of bed. I begged for something, anything, to make it stop. But they knew. They knew I had to feel all of it. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the silence. Without the high, there was no buffer. Just me. Me and the truth. All the memories I'd buried came clawing to the surface. The faces of the people I'd hurt. The things I said. The things I stole. The times I told someone I loved them, just to use them. The times I looked into my own mother's eyes and lied without blinking. I wanted to scream. To run. But there was nowhere left to go. I had to sit in it. Sit in the mess I'd made. Sit in the grief for the person I could have been. I realized then that detox isn't just about flushing out the substance, it's about facing the wreckage. And it's brutal. Because in those long, cold hours, I couldn't hide behind blame anymore. No one was coming to save me. That's when the hallucinations started. I don't know if they were real or just dreams, but I saw things. I saw my childhood bedroom. I saw my father turning away from me. I saw my best friend slamming the door. I saw myself, bloody knuckles, cracked lips, crying on the bathroom floor from 2 years ago. I whispered apologies into the darkness, but there was no reply. On the third day, I broke. Not physically, I'd already done that. I broke emotionally. A nurse sat next to me as I wept into a towel. I told her I wasn't worth saving. That even if I made it out, I'd ruin it again. That I didn't know how to live without the noise in my head. She didn't try to convince me otherwise. She just said, "You don't have to believe in yourself yet. Just don't quit." That stuck with me. I didn't have faith. But maybe I could have discipline. Maybe I could just do the next hard thing. And then the next. Not for anyone else. For me. For the tiny part of me that still wanted to see the next sunrise. By the 5th night, the physical symptoms began to ease. The worst had passed. But the real work, facing myself, forgiving myself, rebuilding from ashes, that was just beginning. And for the first time, I wasn't running from it. When I left detox, I didn't feel like a new person. I didn't walk out into the sun and suddenly feel free. I felt exposed. Like someone had peeled off my skin and left me raw, sensitive to everything. The world felt loud. Every sound, every face, every thought hit harder than I remembered. They placed me in a recovery program, a halfway house. Shared rooms, group meetings, strict rules. No drugs, no alcohol, no excuses. I hated it at first. Hated the curfews, the structure, the chores. But deep down, I knew I needed it. I didn't trust myself yet. I still woke up some mornings with the urge to run. To disappear. To find oblivion. But this place, it didn't let me hide. Every day, we sat in a circle and told the truth. About the pain. The guilt. The rage. The lies. It was terrifying. I hadn't said my story out loud in years, not sober. The first time I shared, my voice cracked. My hands shook. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I said, "Hi, I'm _____, and I'm an addict." The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else. But once they were out, they echoed inside me. Real. Heavy. Freeing. Others shared their stories too. Some worse than mine. Some almost identical. And that's when I learned one of the hardest truths of recovery. You're not special. Your pain isn't unique. Your rock bottom isn't the lowest. And your excuses aren't new. That might sound harsh, but to me, it was relief. Because if I wasn't special, then I wasn't alone. And if they could crawl out, maybe I could too. One guy in the group, Marcus, said something that stuck with me. Recovery isn't about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. I didn't fully understand it then, but it haunted me in the best way. I'd spent so long running from feelings, burying them, numbing them, denying them, that I didn't know how to sit still and feel without being overwhelmed. But now, that was the work. No more escapes. No more masks. Just me and whatever came up. Some days I wanted to scream. Some days I did. Other days, I stared out the window for hours, trying to remember who I was before all this. The person underneath the addiction. The version of me that laughed without guilt, that loved without needing something in return. I hadn't found that person yet. But I was learning how to stop running long enough to look. And in that stillness, scary and uncomfortable as it was, I began to sense the faintest flicker of something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. They told us that eventually, the fog would start to lift. That once the chemicals left our system, the real work would begin. I didn't understand what that meant until the memories started coming back, clearer, sharper, more painful than before. Not just the nights I couldn't remember, but the ones I could. The lies I told to people who trusted me. The phone calls I ignored. The times I stole from family. The birthdays I missed. The people who cried in front of me, begging me to get help, and the way I walked away from them, cold and distant, because my next high mattered more. I had to face it all now. Sober. Awake. Without the buffer of intoxication or denial. And let me tell you, that weight is unbearable if you try to carry it alone. So I started writing letters. Not to send, just to get it out. One by one, I listed the names of everyone I'd hurt. I wrote to my mother first. I told her I was sorry for stealing from her purse. For screaming at her when she cried. For making her feel like she'd failed. She hadn't. I had. Then came the letter to my sister. To my ex. To the best friend who blocked me years ago. Every sentence felt like pulling glass from an open wound, but I kept going. Not for redemption. Not yet. But because the truth needed a voice, and that voice had to be mine. We had a step in the program called Making Amends. And I remember asking, how am I supposed to make amends with people who hate me now? The counselor looked me dead in the eye and said, you can't control how they feel. But you can control whether or not you own your part. That stuck with me. So I started small. I cleaned the dishes without being asked. I apologized to the guy I'd snapped at during group. I learned how to listen without defending myself. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet. Consistent. Real. But the hardest part wasn't facing others. It was facing myself. I had to forgive the version of me that chose addiction. The version that hurt people, not because I was evil, but because I was lost. I had to stop treating myself like a monster and start seeing myself as someone in pain. Someone who needed healing, not punishment. I cried a lot during those days. Not because I was weak, but because, for once, I was feeling everything I used to numb. The sorrow. The shame. The grief for the life I almost destroyed. But I was still here. Still breathing. Still choosing, day by day, to keep walking forward, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Strength used to mean something different to me. It meant toughness. Pride. Acting like nothing could touch me. I wore pain like armor and pretended I didn't care. I thought admitting weakness was the same as admitting defeat. So I kept everything buried. I smiled when I was dying inside. I laughed when I wanted to scream. I said, I'm fine while I was falling apart. But in recovery, I learned something that shook me. Real strength is letting yourself feel. Not hiding. Not pretending. Not stuffing it all down until it explodes. Strength is sitting in your sadness and not running. It's looking your guilt in the face and not letting it define you. It's crying in front of strangers because the weight is too much, and letting them hold space for you, even if they say nothing. I remember one meeting, I finally told the full truth. No half measures, no softened edges. I told the group about the time I overdosed in someone's bathroom and crawled out before they could call 911. I told them how I left someone I loved passed out on the floor just so I could score. I told them how I once stared at a bottle of pills, not to get high, but to end everything for good. And when I finished, I waited for the judgment. For the silence. But what I got was a nod. Just one guy across the room, tears in his eyes, whispering. Me too. That's when I understood, shame loses its power when it's spoken. Secrets rot in the dark, but they shrink when you drag them into the light. And in that circle of broken people trying to become whole again, I found something I never expected, connection. Not the fake kind. Not likes or small talk or empty promises. Real connection. Built on scars, not masks. Built on the courage to say, I was lost, and to hear someone say, "Me too." I started journaling every morning. Not because someone told me to, but because I needed to understand the mess inside my head. I wrote without filter. Rage, regret, confusion, gratitude. All of it. And over time, I started to hear my own voice again. Not the addict voice, the real one. The one I thought I'd buried for good. One morning, I wrote a single line and stared at it for an hour. I'm not a bad person. I did bad things, but I'm not beyond saving. It felt like a betrayal at first. Like I didn't deserve to believe that. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized, self-hatred kept me using. Self-compassion was the only way out. So I kept going. Kept showing up. Kept telling the truth, even when my voice trembled. Because I was building something now. Not just a life, but a new definition of strength. Nobody talks enough about the loneliness of early recovery. Not the obvious kind, like losing friends or cutting ties. That's expected. What hit me harder was the emptiness. The space addiction used to fill every minute, every breath, was now just space. And I didn't know what to do with it. When I got clean, I thought things would feel lighter. But for a while, it felt heavier. Because now I had no escape. No shortcuts. Every hour felt like 10. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, trying to figure out who I was without the chaos. And then came the grief. Grief for the years I lost. For the memories I destroyed. For the version of myself that never got to exist. I'd see people laughing in a park or holding hands on the street and wonder what it felt like to just live, without shame dragging behind every step. There were nights I stared at the door and thought about leaving. Not to use, but just to disappear. To vanish into some place where no one knew my past, where I didn't have to earn back every ounce of trust with slow, exhausting effort. But I stayed. And every time I stayed, I learned something. Staying is a victory. Staying sober. Staying honest. Staying present. Even when it hurts. I started noticing little things. The way the sun felt on my skin. The taste of real food. How it felt to laugh and mean it. I'd forgotten how simple moments could be enough. That silence didn't have to be terrifying. That solitude wasn't the same as isolation. I made a list one night of everything I'd gained by getting clean. It was short. But it was real. Waking up without regret. Looking people in the eye. Remembering conversations. Feeling hungry, not sick. Sleeping, actually sleeping. Breathing. Breathing. Not the shallow kind I used to do when I was hiding. Deep, full breaths. The kind that fill your lungs and make you feel like maybe, just maybe, you belong in your body again. Of course, not every day was progress. Some days I wanted to burn it all down. Some days, the cravings came back so hard I bit down on my own hand just to stay grounded. But the difference now? I had tools. I had people. I had something to lose. Clean doesn't mean cured. It means choosing, over and over again, not to go back. And I was learning how to choose me. Even when it was hard. Especially then. Recovery forced me to dig through memories I spent years trying to forget. Not just the obvious ones, the overdoses, the screaming matches, the nights in holding cells, but the quieter ones. The nights I ignored my little brother's calls. The time I promised to show up and didn't. The birthdays missed. The trust broken, piece by piece. The worst part? Some people didn't even get mad anymore. They just stopped expecting anything from me. That kind of silence hurts more than yelling ever could. One afternoon in group, they asked us to write about a moment we felt ashamed. Just one. I couldn't pick. There were too many. But I chose the moment I stole from my mom's purse while she was sleeping. I needed a fix. She needed that money for rent. I told myself I'd pay her back. I never did. When I read the story out loud, I expected disgust. What I got was nods. A few tears. One woman reached out and said, "I did the same thing. Different name, same story." And that's when I realized, my past was ugly, yes. But I wasn't the only one carrying that kind of weight. We all had our sins. And we all had to decide what to do with them now. They taught us to make amends where possible. Not to erase the past, but to stop dragging it like a corpse behind us. To own our part and leave space for people to feel whatever they needed to feel. Some forgave me. Some didn't. I wrote letters. I made calls. Sometimes all I could say was, "You were right about me. I'm sorry." One person said, "I'm proud of you." Another said, "It's too late." Both responses were fair. I didn't argue. I just listened. Because making peace with the past isn't about control. It's about acceptance. I couldn't rewrite the pain I caused, but I could stop pretending it didn't happen. I could honor the damage by choosing not to repeat it. The hardest person to face, though, was me. I kept a picture of myself as a kid, before everything. Before the chaos, the hurt, the escape. I used to avoid that photo. Now I stared at it every morning and said, "I'm trying." Some days, that was all I could manage. And that was enough. Because healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's slow, quiet, patient. Like a scar fading just a little each day. And every time I chose to stay clean, to stay honest, to stay present, I was telling that younger version of me, "I haven't given up on you." There comes a point in recovery when the focus shifts. In the beginning, everything is about survival. One day at a time. One breath at a time. But eventually, you start to wonder, what now? I had survived detox. I was going to meetings. I was staying clean. But now I had to figure out how to live again. Not just avoid death, live. And that terrified me more than I expected. Because addiction had been my identity for so long, I didn't know who I was without it. Every friendship I had, every habit, every choice, it had all been tied to the substance. Now I had to start from scratch. That meant new routines, new people, new boundaries. Especially boundaries. I had to walk away from people I used to call family. Friends who said they supported me but still used in front of me. People who only came around when they needed something. Letting go of them felt like another kind of grief, but this time, it was necessary. One of the counselors told me, "If you want to change your life, change your environment." So I did. I started volunteering at the shelter that once fed me. I cleaned floors. I handed out plates. No one knew my story unless I chose to share it. And for the first time, I felt useful without needing anything in return. I got a part-time job washing dishes. Minimum wage. Long hours. But every paycheck felt like a trophy. Not because of the money, but because I earned it clean. Honest. I reconnected with my sister. Slowly. Carefully. I didn't expect forgiveness. I just showed up. I listened. I kept my word. And one night, after dinner, she hugged me like she meant it. No words. Just that long, tight silence that says, "I see you trying." And most importantly, I began rebuilding my relationship with myself. I started eating real food. Going on walks. Sleeping through the night. I read books. I journaled. I prayed, not to be saved, but to stay centered. I wasn't looking for miracles anymore. I was looking for direction. Some days were still hard. I still had cravings. I still had flashes of guilt that made me freeze in place. But now I had tools. Now I had people I could call. Now I had proof that I could make it through the day and still hold my head up when the sun set. That was new. Every small win felt massive. A full week clean. A month. The first birthday I celebrated sober. And with each milestone, I realized something simple but life-changing. I was building a life worth staying clean for. I used to think the hardest part of recovery would be getting clean. But the truth? Staying clean, that's the war. And most of it happens quietly, in the space between your ears. Even after months of progress, the voice never really went away. That voice, the one that whispers when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're alone. Just one won't kill you. You deserve a break. You're strong enough to handle it now. It doesn't scream. It seduces. And some days, I believed it. The cravings hit me hardest during the ordinary moments. A bad day at work. A lonely Friday night. Walking past an old street corner. Even certain songs brought it all back, where I was, what I felt, who I used to be. It was like a ghost living in my head, just waiting for a weak moment. One night, I almost gave in. I was walking home late, hands in my pockets, heart racing. I passed a liquor store, and before I could stop myself, I was at the door. I stood there, staring at the glass. I could see my reflection, older, tired, but clean. I could also see the version of me I used to be, waiting inside with a crooked grin. My hands shook. My mouth went dry. I felt like the whole world had gone quiet. And then, without thinking, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter I'd written to myself during a group session months before. The title was Why I Want to Live. I read it. Right there on the sidewalk. My own handwriting, messy and honest, listing all the reasons I had to stay clean. So I don't hurt my family again. So I can look in the mirror without flinching. So I can be present for the people who stayed. So I can have a future. So I can love and be loved back. By the time I finished reading, I was crying. Not from shame, but from clarity. I wasn't that person anymore. And if I walked through that door, I'd lose everything I had fought so hard to rebuild. So I kept walking. That night didn't make me a hero. It didn't earn me a medal. But it taught me that winning the battle doesn't mean silence in your head, it means learning to respond to the noise differently. Every time I chose not to listen to the lie, I got stronger. And strength, I learned, isn't the absence of struggle. It's the ability to stay standing while the struggle screams at you. And I was still standing. There was a day, I'll never forget it, when I laughed. Like, really laughed. A full, honest, from the gut kind of laugh. The kind that sneaks up on you and catches you off guard. I was sitting in the common room of the sober house, drinking coffee, talking about something stupid with one of the guys. And out of nowhere, I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Then I froze. Because in that moment, I realized something, I wasn't faking it. I wasn't high. I wasn't hiding. I was present. I was me. And for the first time in years, that was enough. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. Like my lungs didn't know what to do with all that oxygen. That night, I sat on the porch by myself and watched the sky shift colors as the sun went down. No noise. No panic. Just stillness. I remember thinking. So this is what peace feels like. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't come wrapped in fireworks or grand gestures. It was just a quiet moment when my mind wasn't trying to escape. When my body didn't ache for a fix. When I didn't feel like I had to explain myself or apologize for existing. It was the smallest moment, and the biggest win. Freedom, I learned, doesn't show up all at once. It arrives in tiny pieces. A good night's sleep. A meal that tastes like something. A walk that feels safe. A smile that isn't followed by shame. But for every moment of peace, there were still days of doubt. There were mornings I woke up and felt lost again. Like I didn't know who I was or what I was doing this for. The old voice would creep back in. You've done too much damage. You don't get to be happy. But now, I had something to fight back with, truth. The truth was, I was still here. Still sober. Still showing up. And every time I chose to keep going, I was building a life I never thought I'd get to live. I wasn't chasing highs anymore. I was chasing meaning. I started thinking about what I wanted, really wanted. Not just to stay clean, but to grow. To love. To build. To give back. To be someone I could be proud of, even if no one else ever noticed. That laugh, that porch, that moment of peace, it didn't fix everything. But it proved one thing. Freedom is real. And I was beginning to believe I deserved it. Trust was something I thought I'd never earn back. Not from others, and definitely not from myself. I had broken it too many times, lied to faces that cried for me, promised change while hiding relapse, showed up high to moments that were supposed to matter. So I expected people to keep their distance. And most of them did. Which, honestly, I understood. That's why I was shocked the day I got a message from my father. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not since I'd cursed him out on his porch, stormed off with his wallet in my pocket, and vanished without a word. He never called after that. And I never blamed him. But now, months into sobriety, I opened my phone to find a simple message. Heard you're trying. If that's true, I'd like to talk. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. I didn't know what to feel. Fear. Shame. Hope. I thought about ignoring it. I thought about saying I wasn't ready. But deep down, I knew the real reason I hesitated. I didn't feel worthy yet. But recovery had taught me something important. You don't wait until you're perfect to start healing. You show up messy. You show up afraid. But you show up. So I called him. The conversation was awkward at first. Quiet. Careful. Like we were both holding something fragile in our hands. He didn't lecture me. He didn't cry. He just asked questions. Real ones. How long have you been clean? Do you have people who support you? What's been the hardest part? And I answered. Not defensively. Not like a victim. But honestly. He told me he was proud, not because I was fixed, but because I was fighting. He said, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to stay honest. That sentence broke something open in me. Because I realized, trust doesn't come back all at once. It comes in moments. In small chances. In slow rebuilds. And sometimes, it starts with a simple conversation where no one yells and no one runs. After we hung up, I cried. Not from guilt, but from relief. That call didn't undo the past. It didn't make everything okay. But it was a bridge. And for the first time in years, I had my foot on solid ground. More messages came. From people I hadn't heard from in ages. Some were cautious. Some were kind. Some just said, I'm watching. Keep going. And I did. Because trust isn't something you're given back, it's something you earn back. One day at a time. One decision at a time. And that day, I chose to keep earning it. For a long time, I thought I was my mistakes. Not just someone who had done bad things, but someone bad. I wore my guilt like a second skin. Every room I walked into, I carried the weight of my past like it was tattooed on my forehead. But something began to shift in me. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some revelation under the stars or a voice from above. It was slower, quieter. Like fog lifting from a road I'd walked blindly for years. I started to realize, the shame I carried wasn't keeping me clean. It was keeping me stuck. In group one afternoon, a guy said something that hit me like a punch. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am something bad. One can lead to change. The other will kill you. And I felt that. Deeply. Because every time I made progress, shame would show up and whisper. You don't deserve this. When someone offered kindness, it said. If they really knew you, they'd walk away. And when I looked in the mirror, it said. This is all fake. You're still that broken mess. But now, I had a choice. I could keep agreeing with that voice, or I could finally talk back. So I did. Not with lies or toxic positivity, but with truth. Yes, I hurt people. Yes, I lied, stole, manipulated. Yes, I disappeared when I should have stayed. But I also got clean. I own my actions. I made amends. I chose pain over numbness. And every day since, I've fought to become someone better. That doesn't erase the past. It doesn't mean I forget. But it means I refuse to live in it forever. One of the biggest moments for me came when I told my story publicly for the first time. I stood in front of a room full of strangers, some recovering, some still using, some just trying to understand, and I spoke every part of my truth. The ugly. The raw. The real. And when I finished, they clapped. Not because I was a hero, but because I survived. That's when I realized, my past no longer had power over me unless I kept handing it the microphone. So now, I speak louder. I am not what I did. I am not my lowest moment. I am not the voice that says I'll never be enough. I am someone who chose to rise when it would have been easier to stay down. And that is who I am now. Not everyone stayed. I don't blame them. I pushed people away before they had the chance to leave. I lied, vanished, broke promises. Some of them held on for years, hoping I'd turn things around. Others left quietly, when they realized I wasn't ready. And I get it now. It's hard to love someone who's drowning, especially when they're pulling you under with them. But some people stayed. Not through every relapse. Not through every lie. But they never fully let go of the idea that I could come back to myself. They didn't coddle me or enable me. They didn't pretend everything was okay. What they did was harder. They waited. In silence. In pain. In hope. And when I started to change, they didn't rush in. They watched. Carefully. Slowly. They didn't believe my words right away. They watched my actions. And I had to be okay with that. I remember the first time I saw my mom again. I was 6 months clean. I asked her to meet me for coffee. She said yes, but I could tell she wasn't sure what version of me would walk through the door. She sat across from me, hands folded tightly, waiting. I didn't come with promises. I didn't cry. I just said, "You didn't deserve any of it. And I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm asking for the chance to earn your trust back." She nodded. We didn't hug that day. But we sat for an hour. We talked. And when we left, she said, "Call me tomorrow." That was a beginning. There were others too. My cousin, who used to drive around looking for me when I went missing. The old friend who blocked me and then unblocked me a year later. The sponsor who answered my call at 3 a.m. when I couldn't stop shaking. These weren't grand gestures. They were lifelines. They showed up in quiet ways. A text. A ride. A "how are you really?" that didn't let me dodge the truth. And now, I carry them with me, not as crutches, but as reminders. Reminders that love doesn't mean ignoring the damage. It means believing in the possibility of healing. And for every person who stayed, I try to be someone worth staying for. Because recovery isn't just about saving yourself. It's about learning how to be a better son, sibling, friend, human. It's about becoming the kind of person who can finally show up for others, without lies, without chaos, without conditions. And that's the kind of love I'm learning to give back. I wish I could tell you that after all that progress, I never slipped. But that would be a lie. Relapse doesn't always come crashing in. Sometimes it whispers. It waits for the cracks. And it found one in me on a quiet night, after a rough week, when I was tired, emotionally drained, and convinced I had everything under control. That lie, "just once won't matter," slipped into my head like an old friend. I didn't run to it. I didn't even plan it. I just stopped resisting. For a moment. And in that moment, I broke a promise I'd fought so hard to keep. The high didn't even feel good. It felt familiar, yes, but empty. Like a trick my brain was still wired to chase. And the second it was over, the shame came back harder than before. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment, hands over my face, repeating, "You ruined everything." That voice I thought I'd silenced was screaming again, "You're a fraud. You'll never change. You'll always end up here." But the difference this time? I didn't let that be the end. I called someone. Right away. My sponsor. I told the truth, not days later. Not after trying to hide it. I said, "I slipped. I need help." He didn't yell. He didn't hang up. He just said, "Okay. Let's get back up." That broke me. Because I realized recovery isn't about perfection. It's about ownership. About getting honest faster. About getting back on your feet quicker. About not letting one fall erase all the steps you've climbed. We sat together that night. I told him what happened. What led to it. What I was feeling. We unpacked it all. Not just the relapse, but the pain underneath it. The loneliness. The stress. The pressure to be better all the time. And I learned something that night I'd never understood before. You don't start over from zero. You start from experience. Yes, I slipped. But I didn't stay down. I didn't spiral. I didn't vanish. I chose responsibility over shame. And that, in itself, was growth. The next day, I went to a meeting and told the truth again. No hiding. No pretending. And afterward, someone came up to me, tears in their eyes, and said, "Thank you for saying it out loud. I needed to know it was okay to come back." That's when it hit me. Even my failures could help someone else find their way back. And that gave the pain a purpose. The relapse taught me that recovery isn't a straight line. It's not a clean path paved with motivation and clarity. It's jagged. Messy. Filled with turns you don't see coming. But every morning I woke up clean after that slip, I learned something deeper about myself. That staying sober wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about ticking boxes or earning back approval. It was about making the same decision, again and again, even when the fire of that first choice had faded. It was about waking up and saying, "I choose me, again." Not because I felt strong. Some days, I felt empty. But I chose anyway. I started reworking my routines. I added more structure. Woke up earlier. Meditated, even if it just meant sitting in silence with my eyes closed and my heart racing. I worked out, not to look better, but to feel like I still had a body that could carry me. And I kept showing up to meetings. Kept sharing. Kept listening. I noticed something had changed in how I spoke. I wasn't talking from a place of shame anymore. I was talking from a place of ownership. My voice didn't shake the same way it used to. I didn't rush through my story, afraid people would judge me. I let it land. Let it breathe. Because it was mine. All of it. The pain. The fall. The comeback. I also started helping newcomers. I wasn't a sponsor yet, but I sat with the ones who couldn't look up. I shared my worst moments. Not because I needed to relive them, but because I knew what it felt like to think you were beyond saving. One guy asked me, "How do you stay motivated?" And I told him the truth. I'm not always motivated. Some days, I'm just committed. That distinction mattered. Because recovery, real recovery, isn't about waiting for the perfect mindset. It's about building a new life brick by brick, even when your hands shake. Even when your mind screams at you to give up. And that kind of effort changes you. I started to feel proud, not in a loud way. Not in an I made it kind of way. But in a quiet, solid way. Like I was building something that no one could take from me, not even the version of me that once tried to destroy everything. Each day I chose myself, I got a little stronger. And that's when I realized. Recovery isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily revolution. There was this moment, nothing grand, nothing planned, where I caught a glimpse of myself in a window. Not a mirror. Not a selfie. Just a reflection, passing by. And I stopped. Because for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I didn't see a ghost. I didn't see the addict. I didn't see the liar, the thief, the broken promise. I just saw me. Not perfect. Not healed. But real. Present. Whole. And that moment wrecked me, in the best way. Because I'd spent so long avoiding my own reflection. So long believing I wasn't worth being seen. But now, I stood there on a sidewalk in the middle of a normal day and saw someone I didn't recognize, and for once, that was a good thing. This version of me didn't need to chase highs to feel something. This version could sit in silence and not panic. Could cry without hiding. Could love without needing to be rescued. Could walk into a room and not wonder who hated me or who I'd failed. This version had peace. Earned peace. There were still battles. Still nights where the weight pressed down hard. Still flashbacks that came without warning. Still people I hadn't heard from again, and maybe never would. But there was also light now. There were mornings I looked forward to. There were conversations that didn't end in regret. There were people who laughed with me, not at me, not nervously, not out of pity, but with me. Like I was human again. Like I had value. And maybe that's the biggest shift of all, not the job I got, not the months I'd stayed clean, not even the trust one was rebuilding, but the way I finally started believing I deserved to be okay. I used to think choosing yourself meant walking away from people, setting boundaries, starting over. And yes, sometimes it does. But deeper than that, choosing yourself means refusing to abandon who you're becoming, even on the days you still miss who you were. It means holding yourself the way no one ever did. Showing up for your own healing. Owning your past, while still stepping forward. And being brave enough to say, every single day, I may not be there yet. But I'm here. And I'm not leaving me again. That day on the sidewalk, I saw the person I fought so hard to find. And I nodded. Just once. Quiet. Steady. Because I knew. I was almost home. It wasn't a perfect day. There were no fireworks, no big announcement. The sky didn't open up. No one clapped. I just woke up, looked around my small, quiet room, and realized. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of relapse. Not of loneliness. Not of myself. I stood in front of the mirror, not to criticize, not to avoid, but just to look. To see. And I said it out loud, like a declaration, like a prayer, like a promise. Today, I choose me. Not the me from before. Not the broken version. Not the one people used to whisper about. I chose the version that fought. The version that crawled through hell and kept reaching for the light. The version who learned how to sit in pain without running, how to hold space for regret without drowning in it, how to breathe through cravings without giving in. I chose the version of me that is becoming. Because healing isn't a finish line. It's not a trophy you win or a chapter you close. It's a lifelong return to yourself. Every single day, choosing to rise, to try, to stay. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I look back now and I see the wreckage, yes. But I also see the rebuild. The slow, deliberate construction of a life that feels like mine. Built on truth. On effort. On grace. People ask me what changed. What finally made the difference? And the answer is simple. I stopped waiting to be saved. And I started choosing myself. Not once. Not dramatically. But daily. Quietly. When no one was watching. That's what saved me. Not a miracle. Not a moment. A choice. the day I chose me was the day everything else became possible.